Now, before giving the opportunity to the floor to ask some questions, I would like to ask Professor Rodney Wilson first, and then maybe another question to you, James. Professor Wilson, you mentioned something about Oman and the opportunities for Oman in the Islamic finance. Last week only, we had what's called Oman debate in this very hall, and the debate was talking about employment in Oman. And we had a full day debating this issue. And there was a lot of discussion. And I think you have mentioned, that in praising Islamic finance, there could be some opportunities arise from that, which can create employment for Omanis. Would you please, elaborate on that?
Yes, indeed, very happy to. It's worth stressing that because of the nature of Islamic banking, because it's more participatory, because it's basically more involved in the actual financing and the actual companies that are getting the money and so on, it tends to be more labor intensive than conventional banking. So Islamic banking itself can create a lot of jobs directly in the banking sector. Furthermore, there have been some empirical studies done in Bahrain, for example, which shows for every single job you get in an Islamic bank, you get 3 other jobs in the rest of the economy, because the Islamic bank has to be basically a service in some way. They need lawyers, they need basically accountants, but as well as that, there's all the basic services that go with the banking itself. So it does generate significant multiplier effects onto employment and can be a significant source of employment creation in itself, which I think is very desirable. Obviously, if you can also attract things like fund management and so on, again, that will generate well-paid employment, which again there'll be multiplier effects from. Again, the arranging, the issuance of sukuk, all of that can also generate basically jobs. And of course, Oman is very well placed in many ways geographically because it can serve as a kind of bridge between Africa and Asia, and indeed Europe for that matter. And there is a growing interest in Islamic finance in Africa. And perhaps that's something, given Oman's historical associations with the continent, that can be developed basically. We see Islamic finance now in Kenya, for example, Islamic finance in Uganda, Islamic finance obviously in Sudan. It's all long been there. Africa's a growing region basically. So I think Oman can potentially benefit from that. And I guess the final point I would make would be that it's also possible that there may well be, basically some sort of joint ventures between perhaps Islamic banks here or other types of financial institutions and those from other countries in the neighbourhood, and that can again generate employment here. Because it is desirable to be employing local nationals as far as possible, and obviously you have local nationals in Oman that are wanting employment and looking for employment, or motivated to do this kind of employment. So I think it can make a significant contribution to the local economy here. Yes.
Anyone want to add to what Professor Wilson mentioned in this regard? Or?
Basically, role of Islamic banking and finance in employment generation. There is some very good empirical evidence from Malaysia. Malaysia has used Islamic banking and finance as a tool for empowerment of the local Malay Muslim population called Bumiputra. It's not an expressed stated policy, but the way the government has evolved its policy, this is what has happened. Historically, the Malay Muslims would not go into employment opportunities like in the financial sector because this is #1 interest based, and this is not part of the Malay culture. But with the increase in Islamic banking activity in the country, there is this huge awareness about job opportunities in financial sector, and we find, especially in Islamic banking and finance, and we find that there is a significant improvement in employment of the local Malay Muslim population in the financial sector, which is helping to bring economic development into the Malay communities. And I think this is something which can be replicated in some other countries as well, which face a similar kind of problem. This is not only just overall employment within a market segment, but we find that actually this is bringing a very different kind of change in the Malay Muslim population. Just to give an example, previously, before the development of Islamic banking in the country, the graduates of Islamic schools, they would have these traditional jobs, imams of mosques, or they would serve as teachers in the religious schools, and so on, just 2-3 opportunities for them. But when we look at the graduates of Sharia and law departments of the universities in Malaysia now, about 90% of these graduates, they show a preference to work for an Islamic bank as a Sharia advisor, okay, or in another department within an Islamic bank. And about 60% of them, they end up working in an Islamic bank or financial institution, if not as a Sharia advisor, but in a role which is related with Islamic banking and finance. So this has helped in creating job opportunities for a segment of population which had very narrow kind of employment and economic opportunities. And Islamic banking and finance is serving as a tool to expand opportunities for this segment. And I think because this market segment or population segment, because this belongs to this religious stream of people, this is going to bring a lot of new thoughts and changes in ideas in the religious domain as well, which would be part of the socio-economic reforms in a country like Malaysia and in similar domains where this kind of phenomena exist.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add just briefly to that in terms of the Malaysian experience, and I agree with Humayun, I've seen the change because I've been living there the last 2 decades. 2 comments briefly. One, at INSEAF, we've certainly noticed that with our graduate output, all of them, I would say 87% of them, are employed within 2 months of leaving us, and the majority of them go into Islamic finance in whichever country they choose to go. But we're also developing research programs which feed back into secondary schools and primary schools, where we're actually helping communicate with primary school children on issues of financial inclusion and on issues of financial literacy, where we're not specifically teaching Islamic finance, we're helping them to understand that within the culture, within the country, there are choices, and if you understand the value propositions, you would make the right choices. And I speak very proudly as a parent because my 2 youngest children went through those programs at their schools, and they now understand a lot more about Islamic finance, not because I've taught them, but because they've understood the value propositions which have started being taught in schools at primary school level, where they are being made aware or more aware of financial inclusion and the choices that they have to make as they become more adult.
Thank you. James.
I look at the employment from a very different perspective again. If you fix the problem I was describing earlier, there's lots of demand and there's lots of capacity that doesn't come together because there is no mechanism. The money system is not working, but the demand is there and the capacity is there, and those who have demand also have capacity, but there is no mechanism for that exchange. If you solve that problem and enable the mobilization of even just a small percentage of the hotel rooms in this hotel, and you mobilize them through an alternative mechanism, you increase the working capital of the hotel substantially. Because if you increase hotel room capacity utilization by 1%, you actually impact the bottom line by maybe 6 or 7%. Now you put more money into the economy to retain employees, to hire new employees, to buy more advertising, to drive more activity to the hotel. Therefore, that drives multiplier effect in the economy. And, I mean, that could have very substantial implications.
Thank you, James. Oliver, would you like to add something? Or
Not on this point.
the second question to James. I mean, you mentioned the situation the international financial sector is in right now, and do you think that, Islamic finance could be a solution? And if yes, when can that be done? Briefly, please.
Thank you. I have the view, and I'm not sure yet because I'm now canvassing many stakeholders in the Islamic finance community and more importantly in the broader Gulf region. I think that the Islamic community, and particularly the Gulf region, can play a very important and structural role and have a very material voice in the future evolution of what the economic architecture for the world is going to look like. And the simple reason for that is that we need to get away from fiat currencies that are issued with nothing other than your belief in that country's backing. Now remember again, 178 of them. Only a handful of them are meaningful, US dollar, etc. And yet none of them are backed by anything other than your belief in that country's war machine, fiscal responsibility, and so on. And we've seen how that's performed recently. In order to create a real true exchange, and don't even think about it as money, but just a mechanism of exchange, everything is about confidence and trust. And so if you look at basic fundamental principles of Islam, I mean, they're very solid. It's all about inclusion, fairness. The basic fundamental principles are truly solid. The other important thing is there's carbon assets in the Gulf region. That's real economy. You could start to actually underpin economically a global unit of account that anyone in the world will have confidence in. If I told you that tomorrow I want to buy your hotel services, and by the way, I'm going to pay you in this unit. It's a universal trading unit. It can be used anywhere in the world, has no foreign exchange that accrues to it, it can't be speculated on, and it has no interest. But it's convertible to Saudi's Aramco's oil. That's a pretty good asset. You're going to have reasonable confidence in holding that. So I think that the whole Islamic community, and in particular the Gulf region with its carbon assets, can play an instrumental role, and it can happen now, instantly, because it's ready. The world's ready. You don't need the approval of G20 or the United Nations or the IMF or any of those parties to allow the exchange of capacity or to invent a unit that is the medium of exchange. It doesn't come under regulatory auspices.
Thank you, James. Maybe we'll have time for 2 or 3 questions. Malik?
Actually, they are, if I may talk in English so the speakers will follow up what I am saying. I believe the question that was posed by Sheikh Abdullah regarding the job creation, there are other areas where Islamic finance can create jobs, especially when you talk about SMEs. Many SMEs face difficulties getting loans from the conventional banking because of the collateral. But under Islamic finance, there should not be a collateral, it should be a musharaka. So there will be more SMEs getting into the market, and this will definitely create jobs. The other area is microfinance, especially in the rural areas. Microfinance is not used as a mechanism for poverty alleviation and for job creation yet because of the traditions in the rural areas that riba is haram, and I don't want to deal with banks, I don't want to deal with microfinance institutions. But if there's an alternative in a form of musharaka or murabaha or bay' al-salam in the term of agrarian economies, definitely this will create jobs. Another 2 areas is the awqaf. When awqaf are developed, they are going definitely to create jobs. I mean, awqaf should not be in a form of palm trees, nakhil, or a small shop or something, but it should be developed. There are lots of pieces of lands here in Muscat that are of waqf nature, that are undeveloped. And imagine if those are developed. IDB, the Islamic Development Bank, so far developed 40 waqf projects in a form of commercial centers and office buildings, 40 of them. The cost of these were $1 billion. You don't believe how much income they are generating, how many people they are employing. So that's another area. The proper utilization of waqf is another area where Islamic finance can lend its capabilities for job creation. This is my comment. The question that I want to ask the panelists now it's my turn to ask question. I want you to ask this question because in Oman there's a high expectation that Islamic banks, especially on the retail, will be a very good alternative to conventional banks in terms of pricing. However, we have to be really careful and we should not raise the bar. We should not raise the expectation of people. So I think the various entities here should raise this awareness program that Islamic Bank is not a charity. Definitely there is a cost for the financing it's provided. But again, they think that the interest rate will drop from 8 for consumer to 4. Again, we have to be realistic. Those institutions are newly born and they will be really difficult to give very acceptable charges on their facilities. So I believe what I wanted the panelists to respond to me now, if a regular consumer asked me and said, you are making da'wah for Islamic finance and you want Islamic finance to prevail, but it's too expensive for me. Why should I pay more money and leave the alternative? How you are going to convince the person who is asking you this question that Islamic finance is not expensive? Or if it's going to be expensive, are you going to say the reason? Is it because of regulation? Is it because of the difficulty in structuring? Therefore, we pay, I don't want to mention the name of lawyers, but we pay lawyers more costly because we pay lawyers and so on. There's no standard of products. The normal consumer will not understand these arguments.
Sure.
How you are going to convince the consumer that Islamic finance is not more expensive?
Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz.
آسف على الإطالة.
No. Should there be a premium for having Islamic, products, please?
I'll be happy to answer this. I guess my answer would be linked into a question, which is when we decide to travel business class or first class, we usually pay a lot more for our seats. And the reason is we don't want to be uncomfortable in economy, which is very uncomfortable at times. So we're paying more. We're paying more for the comfort of traveling in business class or in first class. My question to the consumer is, how much more would you pay to be assured a place in heaven in the akhirah? That's it.
Professor Dawood, very briefly, please.
And after this answer, okay, I probably shouldn't say anything, but I think on a more practical side, I can share this kind of concerns in a UK context. When HSBC Amana was thinking of starting its operations in UK, they thought that once they opened their first Amana operations, Muslims from Birmingham, Manchester, Bradford, they would come to the branches and they would break the doors. Okay. They were expecting a lot of demand from the Muslim community in UK. And I in those days, I did a research. I was at Loughborough University, and my research suggested that only 5% of UK Muslims were seriously interested in Islamic banking, and another 20%, they had some kind of interest in Islamic banking and finance. So about 1/4 of Muslims, okay, they are interested in Islamic banking and finance. So when HSBC Amana and others, they started their operations, they did not meet their expectations, and hence they had to revise their forecasts. The question actually, the answer to the question is that in the short run, those who are trying to promote Islamic banking and finance, i.e. shareholders, they should be willing to take a cut. Okay. What happens, before 2007, Dubai Islamic Bank annual profits increased by 187%. Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank, 157%, Bahrain Islamic Bank, 129%, and so on. Okay. And my students, look, they were very happy. Oh, look, Islamic banking is expanding. And I used to tell them, fools, Islamic banking is not expanding. The shareholders' pockets are expanding. Okay. When you look at the return on the deposits or the investment account, they did not reflect any significant increase. If a conventional account was offering 5%, they were offering 5.12%. Okay. So I think in the beginning, in a country like Oman, where Islamic banking is just starting, the shareholders must show their commitment by way of expecting less return on their equity, at least in the first 5 years, to make sure that the products made available to the customers or the customers to be of Islamic banks, they do not have to pay a lot more as compared to conventional banks.
Thank you.
I just have one very quick comment. It'll be very, very
okay,
quick.
please.
There's a great analogy for this. It's the green movement. If you look at green products, people pay a premium because it's good for the earth, and they will pay a premium.
And also it's a challenge for regulators also to, alongside with the shareholders, to make it as cost effective as possible for these products to be introduced. Malik, please.
Fortunate, Dr. Abdul Aziz has asked exactly the same question.
Okay,
which
thank you.
I wanted
Thank you
to
very
ask.
much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So with that, please join me in. Can we take one question? Join me in thanking our panelists here, and since it is the last session for this very productive conference, we would like also to appreciate and thank Engineer Khalid for this initiative, for this successful conference. So thank you very much, Khalid.
شكرا جزيلا للجميع. نود في البداية دعوة السيد طلال بن بدر بن سعود البوسعيدي لتقديم هدية للضيف جيمس فيرو. إذا تكرمت السيد. ختاما، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كما بدأنا، لا شك أنه من الواجب شكر الله سبحانه وتعالى على نجاح هذه المناسبة، ونسأل الله أن يعم خيرها على الجميع. ومن لا يشكر الناس لا يشكر الله. نتقدم بالشكر الجزيل مرة أخرى إلى راعي الحفل السيد شهاب بن طارق آل سعيد، كما شكرناه في البداية نشكره في غيابه أيضا، ونشكر الجهات الرسمية على دعمها، نشكر الجهات الراعية أيضا على دعمها، نشكر الحضور على أيضا حضورهم وتشريفهم، ولا شك أنهم يمثلون الأساس في نجاح مثل هذه المنتديات. من الواضح أن العلم والمال أداتين مهمتين لتقوية المجتمع، تقوية البشرية. والمؤمن القوي خير من المؤمن الضعيف، وبالعلم والمال يبني الناس مجدهم، ما بني مجد من جهل وإقلال. بفضل الله نستطيع أن نلخص هذا المنتدى ببعض التوصيات، ولن نطيل عليكم إن شاء الله. التوصية الأولى: من الواضح أنه يفترض تبني خطة وهيكلة لتطوير وتنمية قطاع الصيرفة الإسلامية في السلطنة، وهذه الخطة يجب أن تبنى على رؤية بعيدة المدى نظرا لأهمية هذا القطاع. التوصية الثانية: هذه الخطة يفترض أن يقوم البنك المركزي والجهات الرسمية المعنية بتبنيها لتوضيح خطة على المدى القصير والمدى البعيد لما في هذا القطاع من خير عظيم يترجاه وينتظره الكثير من أبناء هذا الوطن. كذلك هذه الخطة لتنفيذها نتمنى أن يكون هناك من جميع الجهات المعنية لجنة تنفيذية تتابع تنفيذ هذه الخطة وتتبع للجهات المعنية لنرقى بهذا القطاع وليكون له الدور المرتجى إن شاء الله في الاقتصاد. وهذه الجهات المعنية لا يفترض فقط أن تكون الجهات المالية أو البنك المركزي أو الهيئة العامة لسوق المال، بل حتى الجهات الشرعية والجهات الخيرية والجهات الأهلية والجمعيات والجميع، لكون هذا القطاع قطاع واسع في المجتمع. التوصية الأخرى: من الواضح أيضا أن هناك فرص وظيفية وقطاع واعد، وهذا طبعا يتطلب الكثير من الكفاءات. واليوم يكاد لا توجد دولة، خاصة في السنتين أو 3 سنوات الأخيرة، لا تعاني من موضوع التوظيف، فالكثير من الناس يبحثون عن وظائف، والجميع ينظر إلى أن هذا القطاع فيه فرص واعدة على المدى القصير والمدى البعيد. لذلك يفترض أيضا من مهام اللجنة التنفيذية أن تتبنى خطة تعليمية وتأهيلية لجميع المستويات، سواء في القطاعات المصرفية أو في المناهج الدراسية أو غيرها، كون هذه ثقافة الاستثمار هي تدر منفعة عامة على الجميع على المدى القصير والبعيد. ولا شك أيضا أن البدء في المناهج الدراسية في المراحل الأولى سيضيف قيمة عالية إن شاء الله، وكذلك في الموظفين في الجهات الحكومية المعنية وأيضا في الجهات القطاع الخاص. بفضل الله كثير من المشاركين والمتحدثين والرعاة في المنتدى أبدوا رغبة وتشجيع الحمد لله في هذين اليومين لأن يكون هذا المنتدى منتدى سنوي، وهي الرؤية الحقيقة التي كنا نتمناها، ولكن قبل المنتدى لم نكن نعلم الغيب، والحمد لله بتوفيق الله ونجاح هذا المنتدى سنتبنى أن يكون هذا المنتدى كما أسلفنا منتدى سنويا إن شاء الله. يفترض أيضا كون المنتدى منتدى عمان للاقتصاد الإسلامي، ومن النقاشات التي دارت في اليومين الماضيين أن يكون هناك تعاون بين مختلف القطاعات المعنية، سواء القطاعات المالية أو غير المالية، كون أيضا هناك إيمان ووضوح بأن الثروات لا يمكن أن تكون بمعزل عن المجتمعات، وحينما كانت الثروات بعيدة عن المجتمعات أدت هذه الفلسفة إلى مشاكل، والاثنين الطرفين حقيقة وقعوا في مشاكل، سواء أصحاب الثروات أو الناس الذين بعيدين عن الثروات. فنطالب الجميع بالمساهمة بجميع العناصر الاقتصاد، سواء الأسواق المالية، سواء الشركات، سواء الجهات التعليمية، سواء الأوقاف، الجهات المسؤولة عن الزكاة، البنوك أو المصارف وغيرها. فالجميع يفترض أن يشارك في دعم وتنمية الاقتصاد. أخيرا ولا نطيل عليكم، بإذن الله سنسعى جاهدين لأن يكون لهذا المنتدى الثمار الطيبة، ونجدد دائما وسنسعى إلى المبادرات الهادفة بإذن الله. الحمد لله أيضا تلقينا طلب من الولايات المتحدة قبل المنتدى، وتدارسنا مع بعض المتحدثين بتبني تنظيم منتديات مماثلة في الولايات المتحدة، كون أيضا المسلمين هناك يبحثون عن نوع من التوعية ودعم القطاعات المصرفية الإسلامية، وخاصة بعد الأزمة المالية القوية في الولايات المتحدة. فإذا أراد الله سبحانه وتعالى قد يكون أيضا لمنتدى عمان الاقتصاد الإسلامي أن يتوسع إلى الولايات المتحدة. هناك أيضا طلب من أحد المشاركين بأن يتبنى المنتدى أو شركة أمجاد تأسيس جمعية متخصصة في التوعية وتعزيز الوعي في التمويل الإسلامي. نتمنى أنه يعني لا نستطيع الآن تحقيق تبني هذه المبادرة، ولكن عسى أن تكون من أطراف أخرى